A blizzard on a lonely road. The cold vacuum of deep space. These are the stages for two of the most disturbing stories about the human psyche ever told. Whether it is the crew of the Tulpor hauling a useless cargo of mouthwash, or a woman on a road trip to meet in-laws that don't exist, the ending is always the same. Mouthwashing, and I'm thinking of ending things, aren't just stories about a crash with reality. They're stories about the collision between the people we pretend to be and the monsters we actually are. And in both cases, the most terrifying thing isn't the death at the end, but the life that led up to it. Mouthwashing is a psychological horror game where you work for an interplanetary shipping corporation. In this trip, you're tasked with delivering an incomprehensible amount of mouthwash, while working under conditions that would put any Amazon warehouse worker to shame. In a hyper-capitalistic world, where human life is just another expense to deduct, your crew steadily descends into madness, following your ship's unfortunate crash. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is a book about a girl who's going through a similar and terrifying experience as the crew of the Tulpor, a road trip with her boyfriend to meet her in-laws. And as the title suggests, she's thinking of ending things with her boyfriend Jake. What do these two stories have in common? They both tell a story of sorrow and desperation. One of a man dissatisfied with his reality, who lives a life full of regret because he never took action. And another about a predatory man whose selfish actions violate the life around him. Mouthwashing is a story told not in chronological order. We mostly experience the story through Jimmy's perspective, second in command of the ship to Curly, the captain, and the other point of view we occasionally get to see. But as we will soon find out, he's left in a vegetative state following their crash on the way to their delivery. This crash, however, was no accident, and the narrator and Jake meeting was no accident either. They met at trivia night, where the awkward but smart Jake managed to get a couple jokes out, and with a smooth move, left a note with his phone number in the narrator's purse. Now they're taking the next step into their relationship together, as Jake takes the narrator on a snowy road trip to meet his family. Little does he know, she's thinking of ending things with him. Jimmy is also thinking about ending things. Talking to Curly, he mentions how he feels trapped. Curly, as the captain, believes he reached the top of his ladder and is considering a switch. One to a different job where he doesn't feel like he's running away from something as he does in this delivery business. These remarks make Jimmy feel inferior to Curly. Not only did Curly manage to climb the ladder, reaching the captain status, but in Jimmy's eyes, he's just throwing away his progress by quitting. Something that in Jimmy's point of view is an insult to his efforts, now feeling that he's been attempting to climb the wrong ladder all along. To drive this point home, a psychotic episode follows where Jimmy envisions himself walking in a pool of blood and bent ladders come out of the ground, all crooked. Not a single ladder where he can climb up, where he is left stuck at the bottom, a feeling he knows all too well, creating a physical manifestation of his inferiority to Curly. Jake is also not doing so well mentally, at least not this Jake, the janitor Jake. I have to spoil the main twist of this novel for you to understand the comparison, so here it goes. When the narrator and Jake met, he actually never gave his number. He just imagined he did, as he is currently imagining dating this girl and also imagining the road trip to his parents' farmhouse. Jake is not climbing the wrong ladder. He has actually never taken a step forward. From his social anxiety, mental issues, and lack of social skills, Jake has missed every opportunity he has had in his life, and he can now only find happiness in a fantasy of his own making. His lack of agency in his life led him to becoming a high school janitor, with no life outside of his dead-end job, and similar to Jimmy, is thinking about ending things. But what made Jimmy think of ending things? As they pass by an asteroid, Curly reaches the cockpit as fast as he can, but it is too late now. The collision not only leaves the ship stranded, but it damages Curly beyond recognition, the only one who knew what caused the crash. So, what caused this incident? Leading up to the crash, the crew surprises Curly with their communal birthday. The company reduces costs by making all crew members share a birthday, so that they can have one communal cake. Curly, however, has some breaking news to share as they feast on their cake. They have been let go due to the company going bankrupt. This will be their last delivery. We also come to find out that Jimmy sexually assaulted Anya, the ship's nurse, who has been hinting at these events when talking to Curly. Asking Curly why he thinks the company put locks on the cockpit and the med bay, but not on the living quarters. And later, she tells him she's pregnant. Curly does not take a clear action to retaliate against Jimmy, a choice that leaves Anya even more isolated. Jimmy, having lost his job, feeling trapped, and having the consequences of his assault on Anya developed into a physical thing, a pregnancy, tells Curly that he will take care of things, and routes the ship to their demise. A thing that Curly was not fast enough to stop. Jimmy, unlike Jake, is constantly taking action throughout the story. These actions, however, are all coming from a selfish and immoral man, who is not concerned who he hurts or how his actions affect others. Just like Jake, he's living in his own fantasy world, where he can never be wrong, where every action he takes is for the benefit of everyone in the crew, where in his own head, he is the hero of the story. Jake has not chosen to crash his proverbial ship yet, in this case, to end his life. As they reach his family farm, we see depictions of negligence, mirroring the actual neglect he suffered from his family while growing up. Imagery of dead lambs, with corpses left out in the open now, preserved only by the unforgiving cold. Famished hens that have been eating their own eggs, presumably due to lack of food. Dead pigs that were mercy killed, following an infection that was left untreated, spawning maggots that ate the pigs from the insides. This neglect can be seen as the element that Jake blames on his family for his current state. The dead lambs as his loss of innocence, the starving hens as neglect in his upbringing, and the dead pigs as the exponential decrease of his mental state that could have been prevented if treated at an early age. You never really know if you look at them from afar. From a distance, they seem content and relaxed. Similarly to Jake's parents, Curly is the one who neglected his crew. Knowing and ignoring Anya's cries for help, not taking Jimmy's psych eval seriously, and ultimately letting him crash the ship. The ship had many wounds that Curly ignored. These wounds evolved into a ghastly infection that multiplied like the maggots inside the pigs, and is now eating the crew from the inside. Reality is always in a power struggle with the fantasies of these two men. In I'm Thinking of Ending Things, the narrator receives calls from her own phone number, where she hears a man telling her things only she would know, an act that unsettles her deeply, but as we later come to find out, the caller is none other than Jake, the janitor version, trying to bring himself back to reality. Mouthwash has a similar motive, of reality attempting to regain control. In this case, a symbol of Jimmy's guilt. We see imagery of Paul, the company mascot, who is a cartoon horse that mutates and chases Jimmy down. His guilt materializes, trying to make Jimmy accountable for his actions, bringing him back from his idealized fantasy. This guilt also takes shape in an ultrasound machine later in the game, where we locate two heartbeats, representing Anya's pregnancy. But as Jimmy continues to avoid taking responsibility, he sees the embryos of 2 horses, the sons of the company's mascot, instead of a human embryo. He sees the pregnancy, and therefore the sexual assault he committed, as a responsibility of the company. He also talks to Paul the mascot, almost as if talking to the ghost of his unborn child, refusing to acknowledge it as a human, or even as a living thing. The phone calls are not Jake's only attempt to reach reality. The family basement, a creepy and locked away place, also depicts his subconscious, attempting to escape to reality. In the basement, there are many paintings of androgynous individuals, a creature with large nails, all accompanied by a child. These paintings represent the fractured self. Some of these figures have different genitalia from different genders. We later find out the janitor is both Jake and the female narrator, and this foreshadows this twist in the book. An invisible man who has no sense of self. That is why he has so many paintings depicting all the versions of himself locked up down in the basement, or rather his subconscious. While Jimmy is constantly running from the man he is, Jake cannot picture his true identity, feeling like he doesn't exist. Following the crash, the crew decides to check on their cargo, discovering that the only thing they're hauling is mouthwash, a specific mouthwash that is high in both alcohol and sugar content, almost defeating the purpose of the mouthwash itself, as having this much alcohol and sugar would not be healthy for your oral hygiene. To be risking your life for a company that does not care about you, that laid you off, and then finding out that you're hauling mouthwash that doesn't even work as mouthwash? To say the crew took a moral hit would be an understatement. Swansea, the mechanic of the crew, who has been sober for over 15 years, falls back into his addiction. Using the mouthwash as a replacement for alcohol, the crew follow his leads as the last resort to numb the pain on their predicament. Jake does not seem to abuse any substances, but he too is addicted to a reality that never was, to a world where he would have finally fit in, one where he has a cool and successful girlfriend, where he works in a lab doing research, where he is advancing his relationship to the next step by bringing his girlfriend over to meet his parents. But none of it was real. He's addicted to this fantasy, to the point where he finds himself staring at a wall for hours, thinking only of this crafted reality. And even then, he has no agency over it, as his imaginary girlfriend is thinking of ending things. The crew may decide to drink the mouthwash to numb their pain, but they also don't have control over their situation, and each crew member deals with it differently. Swansea falls back into his alcoholism. Daisuke, who is the intern on the Swansea's wing, follows his mentor and picks up the bottle. Anya decides to lock herself in the medical bay, an act that is followed by Jimmy drugging Swansea to steal his keys, sending Daisuke into dangerous vents to reach the other side of the med bay, and opening the door. This order Jimmy gives seals Daisuke's fate, as he gets fatally wounded from exploring these dangerous vents. And as the med bay door opens, we come to the horrific image of Anya laying in a pool of her own vomit. Anya took her life by overdosing with pills. Dealing with Jimmy's abuse, the neglect from Curly, her anxiety, and now the countdown to her death that started with the ship's crash, left her in a state of desperation. And as she attempted to regain some of the control in her life, she decided how her life would end. Not by one of Jimmy's crazy episodes, not by starvation or malfunctions from the ship, it would be by her own hand. With Daisuke and Anya dead, tensions grow between Swansea and Jimmy. Swansea was the only person to really call out the lies that Jimmy told himself and others. He was the voice of truth, destroying Jimmy's delusion of being a good, responsible captain. Swansea originally had planned to keep the remaining cryopod left after the crash for Daisuke or Anya, as she was pregnant, letting whoever got in the pod be frozen in time for 20 years, maybe giving them enough time to wait for a rescue mission. He kept this a secret, knowing how Jimmy would attempt to steal the pod for himself, being the only chance of survival after the crash. After Daisuke's passing and Anya taking her life, the purpose of the pod was lost in Swansea's eyes, and Jimmy, in his delusion, assumed that Swansea kept the cryopod a secret so that he could save himself. Jimmy's mental state continues to deteriorate as it becomes harder and harder to act as a hero with every immoral action he takes. He starts imagining Swansea chasing after him, and in his mind, he must shoot him in self-defense, rationalizing yet another murder in his eyes. The few seconds before Swansea's death tells us a different story, as he is defenseless and tied up to a chair, where Jimmy delivers the final blow. But not before Swansea calls him out in his bullshit one last time. Swansea accepts his alcoholism, and how he himself is a monster for enjoying the darkest days of his life. But unlike Jimmy, he is being honest with himself. He's not running away from his consequences, from his addiction. He's facing them, spitting straight in their face. Unlike Jimmy, who keeps living on his delusion of grandeur, where he refuses to take responsibility for his actions. Jimmy pulls the trigger to silence the truth one more time. And then, we're in Dairy Queen. Once Jake and the narrator left the farm, they decide to stop for a frozen lemonade in the middle of a blizzard. The Dairy Queen stop embodies their repressed social anxiety and lack of social awareness, seeing how Jake basically ignores the workers that are clearly making fun of them. This also shows how hard it is for Jake to make any human connection, how he's hungry for these social interactions, but even in his imagination, he fails and is mocked. As Jake hungers for connections, Jimmy's feasting on power, stolen power from Curly, who is actually what he is feasting on. Surrounded by all of his dead crew, and as a stark contrast to the cake scene from the start, the feasting scene where Jimmy cuts and proceeds to feed a part of Curly's leg to the dead crew and even Curly, exemplifies his twisted sense of responsibility and delusion. As the captain, he's providing food for his crewmates, whose death he's responsible for. He's seeking the status that Curly had over him. Both Jake and Jimmy are cannibalizing their own lives. Both Jake and Jimmy proceed to their final destination. The narrator and Jake arrive at the high school, as Jake wanted to throw out the cops from their frozen lemonade that they got from Dairy Queen. They proceed to get a little frisky, but are interrupted by a figure watching them from the inside of the school. Jake, furious, goes inside in pursuit. The narrator follows him, but is unable to locate her boyfriend. What follows is a cat and mouse game where the narrator is being chased by the janitor, and after following a trail of Jake's clothes, she's face to face with the janitor, with herself, with Jake. He was them, and they were him. The narrator, Jake, and the janitor were all one. Jimmy gets the bleeding Curly and carries him to the cryopod bay. As Jimmy assures Curly everything's gonna be fine, he places Curly inside the cryopod and activates it. We're all here together now, all of us. He puts a metal hanger from the closet into my hand. I am thinking of ending things, he says. As Jake's reality and fantasy collapses, he takes his life, taking with him his fractured image and personality. Jake's act is one of acceptance. He acknowledges his life, that in his eyes, has been a failure. He accepts his lack of courage, that didn't let him put his number in that girl's purse. He accepts his idealized future as a scientist or a doctor that could never be with his lack of social skills due to his trauma, upbringing, and mental health. He accepts his solitude with no family or friends to speak of. With his fantasy collapsing on him, he accepts his reality, and finally answers a question whether he should continue or not with his life. Jimmy moves off camera as we're frozen in the cryopod as Curly, where his judgmental eye cannot see. Jimmy shoots himself, escaping the responsibility of his actions and the stagnation of being a captain of a stranded ship. Jimmy's last action in his eyes places him as the hero of the story, giving his life to save Curly. After destroying him beyond recognition, after killing Daisuke, causing Anya to take her own life, shooting Swansea, he's taken the easy way out once more to avoid taking responsibility. Ultimately, I'm thinking of ending things, and Mouthwashing serves as the two sides of the same tragic coin. There are stories about the collision between the people we pretend to be, and the wreckage that the conflict between our imagined self and our true self leave behind. Jake spent his life as a ghost, haunting the hallways of a school he could never truly belong to, eventually choosing to dissolve his fantasy when the silence of reality became too loud to ignore. Jimmy, on the other hand, spent his life as a parasite, stealing the title of captain he never earned and consuming the very people he was supposed to lead. One man suffered because he never dared to step onto the ladder. The other suffered because he didn't care who he stepped on to reach the top. But as the blizzard settles over the high school and the sirens fade on the Tulpor, both men find themselves in the same inescapable room. There are no monsters left to blame, no corporate mascots to hide behind, and no imaginary narrators to tell the better version of the story. There is only the mirror that reflects the true self. Jake's suicide is a final, quiet surrender to the truth that he was too tired to keep running from. Jimmy's suicide is his final loud lie, a desperate attempt to play the hero one last time by saving a man he already destroyed. In the end, both stories remind us that the most terrifying thing about being the architect of your own misery is that you're the only one who has to live and die inside the house you built. Thanks for watching.